Penguin Random House Canada presents A Real Emergency, Stories from the Ambulance by Joanna Sokol. Read by Joanna Sokol, Emily Nixon, Araya Mengesha, Wayne Ward.
For my grandfather, the surgeon, who would always say, "When are you going to quit screwing around with this ambulance shit and go to medical school?" When you're running, it's 5 a.m. It's you and the rats and the hookers, and you're seeing things no one's supposed to see. I call it the poo show. And it'll take you right down with it if you don't have your head right. I've seen good medics, great medics, broken out there. This job is the dirt and the shit, and you've got to find a higher power to come home to if you don't want to end your career at the bottom of a bottle or the end of a barrel. San Francisco Fire Department EMS Chief, Jeff Myers. Every day, people were dying there because of some small detail that they couldn't be bothered to observe. Imagine being too tired to snap a flak jacket closed, too tired to clean your rifle, too tired to guard a light, too tired to deal with the half-inch margins of safety that moving through the war often demanded, just too tired to give a fuck and then dying behind that exhaustion. Michael Hare, Dispatches. Talking this leprechaun talk. They've been chasing me for almost 2 years, running and screaming. They watching my every fucking move. Bella, high on meth in San Francisco. Author's note. On accuracy. Like all medical writing, this work contains a balancing act between protecting patient privacy and telling a truthful story. I have changed names and identifying details of all of my patients and most of my coworkers. I've also adjusted the timeline of events. For example, in certain instances, I suggest that a particular call took place earlier or later in my career than was the case. I have used fake names for various hospitals for legal reasons. Like many paramedics, I always carried a notebook and a Sharpie on the ambulance to write down vital signs, medication lists, and patient information during the call. Long before I began writing formally, I found myself jotting down interesting quotes from patients or details of a run that stuck with me. After a particularly challenging situation, I would pour my feelings and impressions into a journal. In this way, I have managed to keep some of the exact wording from calls I ran 10 or 15 years ago. Other pieces of dialogue have been reconstructed from memory to the best of my ability. It is true that the traumatized brain can change or erase certain types of experiences, so I've done what I can to allow the reader to understand my relationship with my own memories. Sometimes the tape gets blurry on the replay, and that confusion is also part of my story. On vocabulary. Language is a continually evolving entity. When I became a first responder, we were taught to use the word homeless instead of bum or hobo. This was to indicate a respect for the human in their circumstance. At the time of this book's publication, some institutions have moved on to use the phrase unhoused individual or person experiencing homelessness instead. The rationale is exactly the same, to highlight the person instead of their condition. Likewise, many academic institutions have swapped alcohol use disorder or opiate use disorder for alcoholism or opiate addiction. I have chosen my words carefully to best reflect the truth of my own experience as a paramedic. While I admire the medical institution's constant effort to revise our understanding of addiction and social welfare, I have found some of the newer vocabulary to be both grammatically unwieldy and emotionally distancing. I have sometimes used the language that my patients and my colleagues use to describe ourselves, rather than that which is recommended by current academia. My hope is that if some of my phrasing is unfashionable, my respect for the humanity of each patient is found instead in both my storytelling and my actions. Prologue. A Real Emergency. The tow truck in the tree is a fun one. The beginning doesn't matter, but it ends with me and my partner staring like slack-jawed idiots at a full-size commercial tow truck hanging 20 feet in the air, suspended impossibly from the branches of a large tree. The driver is limp in the front seat. The radio crackles, requesting an update. Or the undead sparkle panties jump scare. We point flashlights into a dark corner of a cheap weekly rate motel, kicking through broken furniture and piles of clothes. I hear a sound and raise my light to see a woman rearing up out of the bathroom, covered in so much blood that it swings off her breasts and elbows in goopy stalactites. She groans and reaches for us, spraying coagulated drops onto the wall. We both shriek like cartoon characters. She is naked but for high heels and a red sequin thong. When I moved to a different ambulance shift a few months later, my partner buys me a small rubber zombie as a going-away present. Another fan favorite is the kid who finishes off a handle of whiskey with his friends, then accepts a dare to pour Dave's Gourmet Insanity hot sauce all over his softest bits. I pull into a cute cul-de-sac to find a buck-naked teenager writhing and screaming in the middle of the street while a neighbor sprays him down with a hose. On the way to the hospital, I try to ask him about his allergies and medical history, but he can only gasp and cry. "It went in the hole," he sobs. "It went in the hole." Moments like these make for great anecdotes when trying to impress a stranger. Exciting, entertaining, gruesome enough to inspire sympathy, but not so tragic as to be depressing. They grab the reader and promise a gripping memoir full of wacky medical hijinks, sprinkled with humor and tenderness and lots of good trauma porn. Yes, I am fun at parties. No, this is not my real personality. I've worked on a 911 ambulance for 10 years in 3 different counties. My job isn't really what people think it is. "I think it's encephalitis," she tells me, "because it hurts back here, in my neck." The woman motions to the back of her hairline, which is grayed and dry. Susan is 70 years old and called 911 today for a runny nose and some neck pain. She's been sick for several days but hasn't seen a doctor. She lives in a single-room occupancy government assistance high-rise downtown, where she shares a small room with a younger woman she tells me is her friend. We're in San Francisco, where ancient tenement-style hotels are crammed next to new money high-rises, condos, and row houses. A tipsy young couple might walk an extra few blocks to avoid a neighborhood like Susan's. She wears an oversized orange sweater and unravels one sleeve with her thumbs as we talk. The sweater isn't as dirty as a lot of clothes worn by the people we treat, but it's not clean. I take Susan's vital signs and hook her up to the cardiac monitor. I turn the heat up in the ambulance. Susan is like most of my patients, lonely, destitute, and nursing a minor medical complaint. On a TV screen, paramedics are always rushing to try to save a woman crushed under a building, a man bleeding out, or a baby taking its last breath. There are a lot of sirens, a lot of shouting, an occasional goofy drunk for comic relief, but the bulk of the job is invariably depicted as an adrenaline rush. The truth of my work is both less and more interesting. A paramedic today exists in a poorly defined gray area, some combination of field doctor, social worker, and street sweeper. We answer many of our calls without sirens at all, and sit with people nursing complicated problems that only distantly relate to actual medicine. When we arrive at a hospital, we are rarely ushered straight to a room. We often wait with our patients for hours until a nurse has time to take over. As a street medic, I'm never going to see most patients' lab values, but I'll see the inside of their bedroom and their neighbors' bedrooms. I'll see the photos stacked in the dark corner of a closet before I'll ever see a chest x-ray. I climb my bags up 3 flights of stairs, past potted plants, framed certificates, and family photos. I know which houses have illegal back units, which have meth labs, which have a beautiful rooftop deck. I look in the fridge for insulin. A patient directs me into her closet to pick out a jacket to wear to the emergency room. She doesn't like the yellow one. Grab the blue behind it. A Vietnam infantry hat falls as I reach for the hanger. She tells me to put it back. It was her husband's once. The edges of the hat are worn thin. I see moldy kitchens, rotted attics. I leave food out for pets, switch off lights, turn down the stove under a pot of oxtails. Once I read half a poem left in a dead woman's typewriter. We call it the scene. What was the scene like? Is the scene safe?
Sample complete. Ready to continue?